day, everybody. Thank you for joining me. We're continuing our adventure with Moses. Last week, he was 18 years old when he left Egypt. Is that the idea that you had in your mind concerning when Moses left Egypt? Let's talk about that. This is just going to be a review. It says, and when Moses was 18 years old, he desired to see his father and his mother, and he went to them in Goshen. And when Moses had come near Goshen, he came to the place where Israel's seed were engaged in work. And he observed their burdens, and he saw an Egyptian smiting one of the Hebrew brethren. Remember, this was something that Moses did all the time, going to see his mother and father. And he says he did it daily last week. And when the man who was beaten saw Moses, he ran to him for help. For the man was greatly respected in the house of Pharaoh, Pharaoh's house. And he said to him, my Lord, Adonai, attend to me. This Egyptian came to my house and the night bound me and came to my wife in my presence. And now he seeks to take my life away. Do you hear what's going on? We got a man who's kidnapped somebody, raped somebody, and now he's planning to kill him. Well, Moses knows Jehovah's ways, so he took it into his own hands and killed the guy. Well, what happened? Here's what happened. Pharaoh heard about the affair. Somebody else was arguing. He went to try and stop them. They said, are you going to be the ruler and the judge over us? Pharaoh heard. And it says, and he ordered Moses to be slain. So Elohim sent his angel. He appeared unto Pharaoh in the likeness of the captain of the guard. Yehovah protected Moses, them thinking Moses was dead. And then look what happens. It says, the angel of Yehovah, this is verse 11, the angel of Yehovah took hold of the right hand of Moses, brought him forth from Egypt, and placed him from without the borders of the Egypt, a distance of 40 days' journey. Beam me up, Scotty. That's what it sounds like. Where did he take him? We saw last week. Well, here's Torah. We saw last week that Pharaoh heard of the matter, sought to kill Moses. Moses fled from the face of Pharaoh. Didn't say where, didn't say when. It says, and dwelt in the land of Midian. Did he dwell in the land of Midian? Talks about the priests of Midian having 7 daughters. Where did he go from Egypt? It wasn't Midian. We're going to find out. He'll get to Midian, but it's going to be, what did we say, honey? 49 years before he gets to Midian. And another 10 years, 59 years before he marries Zipporah. Wow! That blows my mind. What was he doing? Was he a sheep keeper? A keeper of sheep for 40 years? That's what we've been told, isn't it? Well, then we switched gears and we started talking about this man, Kikianus, the king of Kush. He was at war with the East seed and Aram seed, not Amram seed, like I said so many times last week. Well, he's gone. He leaves this man Balaam in charge. Remember Balaam? We saw him in Africa. We saw him in Kittim. We saw him in Egypt. Now we're seeing him with Kikianus. Remember in Egypt, Moses found out that he tried to kill him when he was 3 and then tried to go after Balaam. And Balaam ran away to the kingdom of Kush, to Kikianus. So now Kikianus is going out to war. Balaam takes over the city, builds up the defenses, brings the lowest kind of the people of the land into the gates and uses them to defend the city. He's going to do it for 9 years. It says at the end of 9 years, Kikianus was seized with a mortal disease. They had made siege on this city for 9 years. Here it is. At that time that the war and the siege were against Kush, Moses fled from Egypt, from Pharaoh, who sought to kill him for having slain the Egyptian. Moses was 18 years old when he fled from Egypt from the presence of Pharaoh. He fled and escaped to the camp of Kikianus, which was at that time besieging Kush. Oh, look at this. Moses was there at the beginning of this. I should have remembered that. Well, this is why we do a review. We've got to get these things solidified in our memories, and hearing it more than once helps us do it, doesn't it? Moses was 9 years in the camp of Kikianus, all the time that they were besieging Kush, and Moses went out and came in with them. Well, man dies. And what do the people do? Look at what they do. They proclaim Moses as the king of Kush. It says they spread a sheet out upon the heap. Well, first, every man took off his garment, laid it at the feet of Moses. I think it's a way of fealty, saying that we are going to serve you. You are going to be the master, and we're putting our clothes down as a gesture for you to stand on our clothes. Big heap of clothes. Then they're going to spread a sheet. And we saw this with, I think, Pharaoh, the very first Pharaoh. Do you remember what was that guy's name? Reuel. Remember Reuel? That was way, way back when we started Yasher about 2 years ago. Reuel was called the first Pharaoh. And when they enthroned him, they put a sheet out, like they did with Joseph, and like they're doing right now with Moses. And they're going to give him, it says they spread the sheet upon the heap, and every man cast into it something of what he had. One a gold earring, the other a coin. Also onyx stones, bdellium, pearls, marble, did Cush's seed cast into Moses upon the heap. Also silver and gold in great amounts. He is the king. Now we went to 73. What's happening here? 27 years old, okay? We are just anointed the king. The king died. The king, Kikianus, king of Kush, died. Moses has taken over. But we're still outside the gates. We got to do something to get inside the gates. Moses, led by Yehovah, has an idea. It says Moses was 27 years old when he began to reign over Kush, and he reigned 40 years. Well, long story short, he got rid of the bad guys. And when he did, Balaam, the magician, when he saw that the city was taken, he opened the gates. He and his 2 sons and 8 brothers fled and returned to Egypt, to Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Look at this. This is like the 5th place that Balaam has been. Africa, Kittim, Egypt, Kush, and now Egypt again. And he's not done. He's going to follow Moses into the wilderness. Look what it says about this man and his 2 sons and 8 brothers fled and returned to Egypt, to Pharaoh. He got his whole family involved in it. It says they are the sorcerers and magicians who are mentioned in the book of the law, Torah, standing against Moses when Yehovah brought the plague upon Egypt. This man, Balaam, has been a thorn in the side of Israel for more than 100 years, probably 150 years or close. He's old. No, I take it back because he's going to die around 180. So he's been with us 140 years, approximately. Well, let's continue. It says, we're still talking about Moses in Kush, the kingdom of Kush. Moses feared Yehovah of his fathers, Yehovah Elohim of his fathers, so that he came not near her. They gave him Adoniah, Kikianus's woman, as his woman. But he wouldn't take her, wouldn't even look on her. He remembered what Abraham and Isaac said about taking foreign wives, especially wives from the sons of the seed of Ham. We're not going to do it. So it says, and Moses feared Yehovah, his Elohim, all his life. And Moses walked before Yehovah in truth with all his heart and soul. He turned not from the right way all the days of his life. He declined not from the way either to the right or to the left, in which Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob had walked. There's a man after our own heart. Well, now we had a chapter that I frankly just skipped. We were talking about Edom, and perhaps it's Edom's in here. It's just so we can again see how wicked Edom is. I skipped it. I didn't feel it was relevant to our story, and I felt we had better things to do with our time. So I'm going to skip to 75. Here we are, 75. It says, at that time in the 180th year. This is the last chapter that we covered last week. Do you remember we were talking about the sons of Ephraim from the tribe of Joseph? They thought they understood a prophetic message. It had been 400 years from a specific time. They measured it from Abram's 70th year, the very first time that Yehovah told him that they would give them the seed and the land. Well, they're the seed. They want to take the land. So here's 400 years. They're saying, by Chinky, we're going to do it. And that's what they did. They took off. They took money. They didn't take food with them, but they took their weapons with them. And they were off by 30 years. It was the 180th year, and we're not going out of Egypt until the 210th year that we were there. Yes, I did say 210th and not 430. It all comes down to understanding what day we're talking about. It says we came out 430 years to the day. Well, we think we went in 430 years to the day, but we weren't. Abraham was in Egypt back when he was in Haran. That's where the 430 years started. And the 400 years started when Isaac was born, because he said, your seed will be oppressed for 400 years, and then I will bring them out. They missed it by 30 years, and as a result, they all died in the valley of Gath. Let's see what I had here. It says, for the evil was from Yehovah against Ephraim's seed, for they transgressed the word of Yehovah in going forth from Egypt. I think they were going in their own strength before the period had arrived which Yehovah in the days of old had appointed to Israel. Let me just show you why I say they were going in their own strength. Here it is, verse 3. They trusted in their strength. They brought no provisions for the road, only silver and gold. So they trusted in their strength. They directed their course. Who directed their course? They directed their course. They went to Gath. They died in Gath in the valley, and their bones were very dry bones. Well, 10 men escaped from 30,000 and came back, told their father Ephraim, yes, Ephraim's still alive. Isn't that amazing? You know, you read stories like this in Yasher and you think, is this really happening? Was Ephraim still alive? Well, I found it in Chronicles. Look at this. First Chronicles says the men of Gath who were born in that land killed them. Talking about Ephraim's seed, because they came down to take away their cattle. Then Ephraim, their father, mourned for many days, and his brethren came to comfort him. And when he went to his woman, there it is right here, the last thing he read, when he came to his woman, she bore a son. And called his name, and he called his name Bariah, because tragedy had come upon his house. Well, so very interesting to see how these things fit together, and it explains things in Torah that you wouldn't otherwise understand. Well, this is where we're going to pick it up today. Hey, that was pretty good, 22 minutes. And Moses, the son of Amram. Now I can actually say Amram, not Aram. It's Amram, the son of Amram, was still king in the land of Kush in those days. And he prospered in his kingdom, and he conducted the government of Cush's seed in justice, in righteousness, and integrity. Oh my, wouldn't you love to live in a government where justice, righteousness, and integrity was the rule of thumb? Well, I want to rule in Jehovah's kingdom so I can have my own land. But I would take that as a quick second. It says, and all Cush's seed loved Moses all the days that he reigned. And all the inhabitants of the land of Kush were greatly afraid of him. Look at that. Love and fear. They went together. I think that's how it is with Yehovah. I love Yehovah, but I greatly fear Yehovah. I don't want to cross any lines because I know what he can do to me and mine. And in the 40th year of the reign of Moses over Kush, how long did he reign? It said 40 years. Here's the 40th year. Moses was sitting on the royal throne. Well, Adonia, the queen, was before him. Remember, she was given to him. Never came to her. She's bitter. And all the nobles were sitting around him. Here they are, big council chamber. Moses is there. Adonia is there. And the nobles are there. And here's Adonia, this woman, standing up and addressing the crowd. This is Adonia, the queen, stood before the king and the princes. What is this thing which you do, Cush's seed, have done for this long time? Surely you know that for 40 years that this man has reigned over Kush. He has not approached me, nor has he served the Elohim of Cush's seed. Now therefore, O you seed of Cush, let this man no more reign over you, as he is not our flesh. Listen to this. Can you believe what you're hearing? She's doing this in front of her husband, her king. I said, I knew she was a Jezebel. I think Moses knows she's a Jezebel. She goes on, behold, Menachris, my son, is grown up. Let him reign over you. For is it better for you to serve the son of your Lord, your Adon, than to serve a stranger? She continues, a slave from the king of Egypt? Was Moses ever a slave? No. But you know what? When you're being persecuted, people exaggerate to make their point, to stir people up, to get their way. And all the people, we're talking men people, not lady people, and nobles of Cush's seed heard the word of Adonia, the queen, had spoken in their ears. And all the people were preparing until the evening. And in the morning they rose up early and made Menachris, son of Kikianus, king over them. Happened that fast. And all Cush's seed were afraid to stretch forth their hand against Moses. Moses is tough. He's got the strength of Israel's seed. For Yehovah was with Moses. And Cush's seed remembered the oath which they swore unto Moses. Therefore they did not harm him. I think the oath that they swore was that oath of fealty when they put their cloaks on the ground in front of him 40 years before. Look what it says. But Cush's seed gave many presents to Moses and sent him from them with great honor. I always wondered, did he go without anybody with him? Remember, he had been given lots of gold, bdellium, silver, all this stuff. And now they're giving him even more riches. How do you even carry it? Did he have servants that went with him? And if so, what happened to those servants? Well, now it says, so Moses went forth from the land of Kush and went home. Went home. Where's home? Egypt? Canaan? Goshen? Midian? Why would Midian be home? It says he went home and ceased to reign over Kush. And Moses was 66 years old when he went out of the land of Kush. 66 years. I think he was 67. We saw that he became king when he was 27, left when he was 40 years later. Well, it says, for this thing was from Yehovah. For the period had arrived which he had appointed in days of old to bring forth Israel from the affliction of Ham's seed. Hear that? This is the time period that it's finally happening. Now, it says it wants us to read Exodus 2:16 through 20. Oh my goodness. Do you know that we have read, this is the 71, 72, 73, 74, skip 75, 76. This is 76. We've read 5 chapters and have only gotten 15 verses in Exodus 2. Let's turn to Exodus 2. When Pharaoh heard of this matter, he sought to kill Moses. Hear that? Pharaoh heard that Moses had killed the Egyptian. He seeks to kill Moses. Now it says Moses fled from the face of Pharaoh and dwelt in the land of Midian and sat down by a well. Well, we don't know that from 15a to 15b, there was 49 years. 49 years. And there's going to be 10 years before he actually marries Zipporah. Let's watch and see what happens. It says, now the priest of Midian had 7 daughters. The priest. Well, first of all, there is no the priest. But it does say Kohan Midian. Kohan Midian, not the priest. It could maybe be a priest of Midian. I can't find anybody who agrees with me. But I think it's not so much priest as it is prince. I think he's a prince of Midian. Now, I say that knowing that this man understands the history of the Hebrew people. We're going to see that his daughter Zipporah understands the history of the Hebrew people, the great things that Yehovah has done for them. Torah says priest of Midian several times. But Yasher, from what I have seen, never calls him a priest of Midian. He simply calls him a Midianite. I think he's a prince. I think he's the head of the family, maybe a head of a tribe. But is he a priest? I don't know. Perhaps it doesn't matter. Would a priest serve in Pharaoh's court? Would a priest do what this man is going to do to Moses, putting him in prison for 10 years to die, not even feeding him? Would a priest do that? Those are the kinds of questions that I ask myself when I see this kind of thing in this kind of translation. It says, now Midian's priest. Yeah, it makes it sound like he's the only priest. A priest of Midian had 7 daughters, let's say it like that. A priest of Midian had 7 daughters. And they came and drew water, and they filled the troughs of their father's flock. Look at this. When we go through Torah, this man actually has 3 names. We're only going to see 2 of them right now, but there's a 3rd name. I forget where it is, but we'll find it before long. It says, here they're calling him Exodus 2:18. Exodus 2, I guess they didn't give him a name in 16. 18, they're calling him Reuel. When they introduced us to him in Yasher, they called him one name, and then at the end, they called him the other name. Here he's called Reuel. Exodus 3, he's called Jethro. Then he's called Jethro. Exodus 18, Jethro. Why the difference? I don't know the difference. I can't tell you. Now a priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came and drew water, and they filled the troughs to water their father's flock. Then the shepherds came and drove them away, but Moses stood up and helped them and watered their flock. When they came to Reuel, their father, "How is it that you have come so early?" And they said, "An Egyptian delivered us from the hand of the shepherds." An Egyptian, that made more sense when he had just left Egypt. Doesn't make quite as much sense now, does it? When we understand that there's been 49 years between the time he left Egypt and the time he's finally arriving at the well. Did he speak Egyptian? Did he have an Egyptian accent? Did he still dress Egyptian? I have a hard time thinking that he dressed Egyptian. I would think he would look a bit like a Kushite king. "How is it that you've come so soon today?" Look what they answered. And they said, "An Egyptian delivered us from the hand of the shepherds." Oh, we need to be delivered from the hands of the shepherds. There's a lot of shepherds out there taking our water. And Jehovah is going to deal with those shepherds. Look what he says. This is Jeremiah 23. He's going to put up new shepherds. He says, "Woe to the shepherds who destroy and scatter the sheep of my pasture," says Jehovah. "Therefore, thus says Jehovah, Elohim of Israel, against the shepherds who feed my people. You've scattered my flock, driven them away." Isn't that what they just did? Drove them away. "And not attended to them. Behold, I will attend to you for the evil of your doing, says Jehovah. But I will gather the remnant of my flock out of the countries where I have driven them, and bring them back to their folds, and they shall be fruitful and increase." He says, "I will set up shepherds over them who will feed them, and they shall fear no more, nor be dismayed, nor shall they be lacking, says Jehovah." That's our hope for the future. What did it say? Moses is getting ready to bring Israel's seed out of Egypt with a strong arm. It says, "No longer will they say, 'Great is Jehovah who brought Israel's seed out of the land of Egypt,' but 'Great is Jehovah who brought Israel's seed out of the north and out of all the places where he had scattered them.'" We're going to see even greater events in the future. So he said to his daughters, "Where is he? Where's this guy that helped you? Why is it that you have left the man? Call him that we may eat bread." Well, the next thing we know, he's giving Moses Zipporah. But we have to read a whole lot more before we understand between 20 and 21 now. Let's take a look. This is going to be in Yasher. "And Moses went to Midian, for he was afraid to return to Egypt on account of Pharaoh." Remember, that Pharaoh was still alive at this point. The one that he grew up with. The one whose daughter raised Moses like she was his mom, his foster mother. His foster mother was the daughter of this Pharaoh. Wow, makes for a very small picture, doesn't it? And the 7 daughters of Reuel, look at what it says, the Midianites, doesn't say a prince of Midian, doesn't say a priest of Midian, just Midianites, went out to feed their father's flock. And they came to the well and drew water to water their father's flock. So the shepherds of Midian came and drove them away. And Moses rose up to help them and watered their flock. Okay, this is what we were just reading in Exodus 2. And they came home to their father Reuel and told him what Moses did for them. And they said, an Egyptian man has delivered us from the shepherd's hands. He drew up water for us and watered our flocks. And Reuel said to his daughters, and where is he? Wherefore have you left the man? And Reuel sent him and fetched him and brought him home, and he ate bread with him. Well, this is where we left off. But listen to what happens now. And Moses related to Reuel that he had fled from Egypt and that he reigned 40 years over Kush, and that they afterwards had taken the government from him and had sent him away in peace with honor and with presents. You know, sometimes you hear the first part and you don't hear the second part. You hear the negative, but you don't hear the positive. I think this is what's going on in Reuel's head right now. Egypt sent him away. Kush's seed, remember, Kush is powerful. They were fighting Aram. They were fighting the east seed. You know what? Reuel is one of the east seed. He's a Midianite. Remember, the east seed come from Keturah. He's a son of Keturah, the fourth born son of Keturah. He's hearing this, and he doesn't hear, sent him away with peace and honor and with presents. And what does he do? Look what he did. Is this man a priest? Is this just? Is this righteous? When Reuel heard the words of Moses, Reuel said within himself, I will put this man into the prison house, whereby I shall conciliate Cush's seed, for he has fled from them. Don't want to make war with your enemies. And they took and put him in the prison house. Did he have servants with him? Did they have to subjugate the servants as well? Did they chase him away? Did they put them in prison with Moses? And Moses was in prison 10 years. And whilst Moses was in the prison house, look what happened. Zipporah, Reuel's daughter, took pity over him and supported him with bread and water all the time. Moses is going to be in prison until he's 77 years old. 10 years in prison. And all Israel's seed were yet in the land of Egypt, serving the Egyptians in all manner of hard work. And Egypt's hand continued in severity over Israel's seed in those days. Look what happens now. It says, at that time, Yehovah smote Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Which Pharaoh are we talking about? It's Melal. Remember Melal? That's the one that he took the crown from. That's the one who his mother was the daughter of. And the man that he's going to strive with when he finally comes to Egypt, Moses comes to Egypt and talks with Pharaoh, is going to be Melal's son, a son that he's never met. At that time, Yehovah smote Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and he afflicted him with the plague of prophecy from the sole of his foot to the crown of his head. Owing to the cruel treatment of Israel's seed was this plague at that time from Yehovah upon Pharaoh, king of Egypt. For Yehovah had hearkened to the prayer of his people. His people. Who are his people? Israel's seed. And their cry reached him on account of their hard work. Still his anger did not turn from them. And the hand of Pharaoh's hand was still stretched out against Israel's seed. And Pharaoh hardened his neck before Jehovah. And he increased his yoke over Israel's seed and embittered their lives with all manner of hard work. And when Jehovah had inflicted the plague upon Pharaoh, king of Egypt, he asked his wise men and his sorcerers to cure him. Who were they? Balaam and his sons and his brothers. And his wise men and sorcerers said unto him that if the blood of the Elohim were put into the wound, he would be healed. We're talking about the young males of Israel. And Pharaoh hearkened to them and sent his ministers to Goshen to Israel's seed to take away their Elohim. And Pharaoh's ministers went and took the infants of Israel's seed from the bosoms of their mothers by force. And they brought them to Pharaoh daily, a child each day. And the physicians killed them and applied them to the plague. Thus they did all the days. Can you imagine the mess that they're making? And the number of Elohim which Pharaoh slew was 375. But Jehovah hearkened not to the physicians of Egypt's king, and the plague went on increasing mightily. And Pharaoh was 10 years afflicted with that plague. Still, the heart of Pharaoh was more hardened against Israel's seed. This 10 years is the same 10 years that Moses is in Reuel's prison. And at the end of 10 years, Jehovah continued to afflict Pharaoh with destructive plagues. And Jehovah smote him with a bad tumor and sickness at the stomach. And that plague turned to a severe boil, having all kinds of problems. At that time, the two ministers of Pharaoh came from the land of Goshen, where all Israel's seed were, and went to the house of Pharaoh and said to him, We have seen Israel's seed slacken in their work and negligent in their labor. And when Pharaoh heard the words of his minister, his anger was kindled against Israel's seed exceedingly, for he was greatly grieved at his bodily pain. He's thinking they're slacking off because he's sick. And he answered and said, Now that Israel's seed knows that I am ill, they turn and scoff at us. Now therefore harness my chariot for me, and I will betake myself to Goshen, and will see the scoff of Israel's seed with which they are deriding me. So his servants harnessed his chariot for him. The guy doesn't know when to quit. He got leprosy. Then he's getting inflicted with these boils and the other things that he had with him, tumors. And now he's still doing it. And they took him and made him ride upon a horse. I thought he was going by chariot, for he was not able to ride by himself. I thought, that doesn't make sense. And he took with him 10 horsemen and 10 footmen and went to Israel's seed. Is he going by horse or is he going by chariot? Can he drive either? Ride a horse, drive a chariot? And when they had come to Egypt's border, the king's horse passed into a narrow place, elevated in the hollow part of the vineyard, fenced on both sides, the low plain country being on the other side. And the horses ran rapidly in that place and pressed each other. And the other horses pressed the king's horse. And the king's horse fell into the low plain whilst the king was riding upon it. And when he fell, the chariot turned. Was he riding the horse? Pulling a chariot? I don't know. The chariot turned over the king's face, and the horse lay upon the king. And the king cried out, for his flesh was very sore. And the king's flesh was torn from him, and his bones were broken, and he could not ride. For this thing was from Jehovah to him. For Yahweh heard the cries of his people. Who are his people? Israel's seed, and their affliction. And his servants carried him upon their shoulders. Look at this, a little at a time. Did they take this piece and go here, and then that piece and go there? No, I think they were moving him just a little bit at a time. And they brought him back to Egypt. And the horsemen who were with him came also to Egypt. And they placed him in his bed, and the king knew that his end was come to die. So Aparaneth, the queen, his woman, came and cried before the king. And the king wept a great weeping with her. And his nobles and servants came on that day and saw the king in that affliction, and wept a great weeping with him. And the princes of the king and all his counselors advised the king to cause one to reign in his stead in the land, whomever he should choose from his sons. And the king had 3 sons and 2 daughters, which Aparaneth, the queen, his woman, had borne to him, besides the king's children of concubines. So the concubines' sons are not going to be considered, but his three sons are going to be considered. Listen to what he says. And these were their names: the firstborn Othri, the secondborn Adikam, the third Morian, and their sisters. The name of the elder, look who the elder is, you guys. Bethia. That's Moses' foster mom. Remember, he is going to be 78 years old when he comes back. No, when he gets out of jail. 77, 78, when he gets out of jail. He's not going to be back to Egypt for another couple years. Bethia, when he comes back to Egypt, if he's 80, she must be close to 100. She can't be, could she be younger than 20 when she took Moses from the water? Maybe she could, but all right, 90. This is an old woman, but it's so interesting to see how these pieces fit together. And the other sister is called Akuzia. Well, look what it says about the firstborn, Othri. Othri, the firstborn of the king, was an idiot, precipitate and hurried in his words. Adikam was a cunning and wise son, and knowing in all the wisdom of Egypt, but unseemly aspect, thick in flesh, and very short in stature. We're talking very short. Look what it says. His height was 1 cubit. This is a cubit. He's this tall. Oh my goodness. Sure blows your mind over the Egypt or the Pharaoh that we see in Exodus. Might give him another hand width. Maybe 24 inches. Let's give him a break. 24 inches. 2 feet tall. Oh, scary. And when the king saw Adikam, his son, intelligent and wise and in all things, the king resolved that he should be king in his stead after his death. And he took for him a woman, Gedudah, daughter of Avalat. And he was 10 years old, and she bore him 4 sons. Here he is, 10 years old. When did she take these? When did he take her as his woman? It appears to me he was sick for 10 years, but it seems like at the end of 10 years, he took the son. But now, here's the son taking this woman and being named as king. Maybe he's not king yet. Maybe he's just getting named as king, and this is the beginning of the 10 years. And he's not going to reign until his father dies. That could be, I guess. There's something here that doesn't quite fit the numbers, and I'll show you that in a moment. It says he was 10 years old, and she bore him 4 sons. And afterwards he went and took 3 wives and begat 8 sons and 3 daughters. I think this happened after his reign in Egypt. we're going to see he does survive. Reuel was right, and I was wrong. Na 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 na. I thought he died in the flood. But apparently he didn't. And the disorder greatly prevailed. And the disorder greatly prevailed over the king, and his flesh stank like the flesh of a carcass cast upon the field in summertime during the heat of the sun. Must have been nasty. And when the king saw that the sickness had greatly strengthened itself over him, he ordered his son Elohim to be brought to him, and they made him king over the land. This is the man that Moses is going to deal with. And at the end of 3 years, the king died in shame, disgrace, and disgust. And his servants carried him and buried him in the sepulchre of the kings of Egypt in Zone Mitzrayim, Zone Egypt. And they embalmed him not, as was usual with kings, for his flesh was putrid, and they could not approach to embalm him on account of the stench. So they buried him with haste. For this evil was from Yehovah to him, for Yehovah had requited him evil for the evil which in his days he had done to Israel. And he died with terror and with shame, and his son Elohim reigned in his place. Now we're going to get to this note in just a second. Well, here it is. Elohim was 20 years old when he reigned over Egypt. He reigned 4 years. Why only 4 years? Because there was no Egypt after that, and he left in shame. 20 years old. That means he was, how old was he when he took the woman? 10 years old? So he had those 4 sons. I always like to put these things together. He was 10 years old, 16, 4 sons in 6 years, apparently. In the 206th year of Israel's going down to Egypt. Well, that makes sense. If he is going to reign 4 years, and we're leaving in the 210th, and he's 4 years away from finishing his reign, that would make sense. In the 206th year of Israel's going down to Egypt, did Elohim reign over Egypt. But he continued not so long in his reign over Egypt as his fathers had continued in their reigns. Well, yeah, his father reigned for 94 years. The ones before that reigned much longer, 40 years. And Malal, his father, reigned, there it is right there, 94 years in Egypt. But he was 10 years sick, and he died. I put Malal began to reign in his 112th year. I figured that's what it has to be. But we're going to find that's not correct. It says he began to reign in his 102nd year. So something's wrong with the numbers here. They just don't fit if they have a 94-year reign, unless there might have been 10 years where nobody reigned. Maybe that's what happened. And then when he died, then we had somebody reign again. That may be what's going on. I don't know how it works out like that. And the Egyptians called the name of Elohim Pharaoh, like the name of his fathers. Remember, everybody gets to be called Pharaoh, just like when you're in the Philistines and you become a king, you always get to be called Avimelech. Pharaoh, like the name of his fathers, as was accustomed to do in Egypt. And all the wise men of Pharaoh called the name of Elohim Ahaz, or maybe Akaz. For short is called Akaz in the Egyptian language. They're probably calling him Shorty. Hey, Shorty. And Elohim was exceedingly ugly, and he was a cubit and a span, and he had a great beard that reached the soles of his feet. Did he maybe grow a span? Maybe that's what happened. He's up to 24 inches now. And Pharaoh sat upon his father's throne to reign over Egypt, and he conducted the government of Egypt in his wisdom. Can you imagine how ridiculous that would look? having this little shorty guy sitting on the throne? It blows my mind. And he went with his servants to Goshen, to Israel's seed. And he strengthened the labor over them. And he said unto them, complete your work, each day's task, and let not your hand slacken from our work from this day forward, as you did in the days of my father. And he placed officers over them from amongst Israel's seed. And over these officers he placed taskmasters from amongst his servants. And he placed over them a measure of bricks for them to do according to that number day by day. And he turned back and went to Egypt. And at that time, the taskmasters of Pharaoh ordered Israel's seed's officers, remember those are the ones that are over them, according to the command of Pharaoh, saying, thus says Pharaoh, do your work each day and finish your task. Observe the daily measure of bricks. Diminish not anything. And it shall come to pass that if you are deficient in your daily bricks, I will put your Yeladim in their stead. And the taskmasters of Egypt did so in those days as Pharaoh had ordered them. And whenever any deficiency was found in Israel's seed's measure of their daily bricks, the taskmasters of Pharaoh would go to the wives of Israel's seed and take infants of Israel's seed in the number of bricks deficient. They would take them by force from their mother's laps and put them in the buildings instead of their bricks. And their fathers and mothers were crying over them and weeping when they heard the weeping voices of their infants in the wall of the building. Now, right about now, you're probably saying, why does he keep saying Yeladim instead of children? Weren't they putting girls in the wall? No, they don't put girls in the wall. They want to get rid of Israel's seed. Look what it says. Their Yeladim, these are sons. The taskmasters prevailed over Israel, and Israel's seed should place their Yeladim in the building, so that a man placed his son in the wall and put mortar over him, whilst his eyes wept over him, and his tears ran down upon his child. And the taskmasters of Egypt did so to the babies of Israel for many days, and no one pitied or had compassion over the babies of Israel's seed. It makes sense. They've been trying to wipe out Israel all this time. And the number of number of all the Yeladim killed in the buildings was 270. Some whom they had built upon instead of bricks, which had been left deficient by their fathers, and some who they had drawn out dead from the building. And the labor imposed on Israel's seed in those days of Anakim exceeded the hardship that which they performed in the days of his father Melal. And Israel's seed sighed every day on account of their heavy work. For they had said to themselves, behold, when Pharaoh shall die, his son will rise up and lighten our work. Isn't this what we always hope, that things are going to get better with a new president, a new leader? This is what happened in the days of Rehoboam and Jeroboam. Look at this. Jeroboam and all Israel came and spoke to Rehoboam. Rehoboam is Solomon's son. He was the one who was going to reign when Solomon died, saying, your father made our yoke heavy. Now therefore lighten the burdensome service of your father and his heavy yoke, which he put on us, and we will serve you. Well, Rehoboam got counsel from his friends instead of the elders of Egypt, and decided to work them harder, and that is why Israel became divided, Israel and Judah. But they increased the latter work more than the former. And Israel's seed sighed at this, and their cry ascended to Elohim on account of their labor. And Elohim heard the voice of Israel's seed. Remember, he doesn't hear the voice of the wicked. He hears the voice of the righteous and their cry in those days. And Jehovah remembered to them his covenant, which he had made with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And Elohim saw the burden of Israel's seed and their heavy work in those days, and he determined to deliver them. Remember, we already saw that it was not Levi's seed. None of Levi's seed worked for Pharaoh. And Moses, the son of Amram, was still confined in the dungeon in those days, in the house of Reuel the Midianite. And Zipporah, Reuel's daughter, did support him with food secretly day by day. Moses was confined in the dungeon of Reuel's house for 10 years. And at the end of 10 years, which was the first year of the reign of Pharaoh in Egypt, in place of his father, did you hear that? The sickness that was on the Pharaoh and this wickedness that's being done to Moses is happening concurrently. Zipporah said to her father Reuel, "No person inquires or seeks after the Hebrew man." They know he's the Hebrew man. Funny, they don't call him the Egyptian, they call him the Hebrew man now. "Whom thou didst bind in prison now 10 years. Now therefore, if it seems good in thy sight, please, Daddy, let us send and see whether he is living or dead." But her father knew not that she had supported him. And Reuel, her father, answered and said to her, "Has ever such a thing happened that a man should be shut up in prison without food for 10 years, and that he should live? Did he knowingly put him in jail and purposely not give him food for 10 years? Does that sound like something a priest would do? Maybe a wicked priest. And Zipporah answered her father, saying, "Surely thou hast heard that Elohim of the Hebrews is great and awful." Great and awful. Isn't that interesting? Great and awful. Not awesome, great and awful. And does wonders for them at all times. He it was who delivered Abraham from Ur. This is Zipporah knowing that Abraham was delivered from Ur, from the furnace, Nimrod's furnace, and Isaac from the sword of his father, Jacob from the angel of Jehovah who wrestled with him at the ford of Jabbok. Also with this man has he done many things. He delivered him from the river of Egypt, the sword of Pharaoh, and from Kush's seed. So also can he deliver him from famine and make him live. And so also can he deliver him from you, Dad. Kind of what you're saying. And the thing seemed good in the sight of Reuel. And he did according to the word of his daughter. And he sent to the dungeon to ascertain what became of Moses. And he saw, and behold, Moses was living in the dungeon, standing upon his feet, praising and praying to Elohim of his ancestors. Did he know that Zipporah was going to ask for his freedom? And Reuel commanded Moses to be brought out of the dungeon. So they shaved him, and he changed his prison garments and ate bread. And afterwards Moses went into the garden of Reuel, which was behind the house. And he there prayed to Jehovah, his Elohim, who had done mighty wonders for him. Moses wasn't embittered after being in jail for 10 years. And it was that whilst he was praying, he looked opposite to him, and behold, a sapphire stick was placed in the ground, which was planted in the midst of the garden. And he approached the stick, and he looked, and behold, the name of Jehovah Elohim of hosts was engraved thereon, written and developed upon the stick. And he read it, and stretched forth his hand, and he plucked it like a forest tree from a thicket, and the stick was in his hand. What is the stick? And this is the stick with which all the works of our Elohim were performed. After he created heaven and earth and all the hosts of them, seas, rivers, and all their fishes. And when Elohim had driven Adam, who did he drive out? The man from the Garden of Eden. He took the stick in his hand and went and tilled the ground from which he was taken. And the stick came down to Noah and was given to Shem and his descendants until it came to the hand of Abraham, the Hebrew. And when Abraham had given all he had to his son Isaac, he also gave to him the stick. And when Jacob had fled from Paddan Aram, he took it in his hands when he returned to his father, and he had not left it behind him. Also, from when he went down to Egypt, he took it in his hand and gave it to Joseph, one portion above his brethren. For Jacob had taken it by force from his brother Esau. I don't remember that being in Yasher, that he had taken it by force from Esau. And after the death of Joseph, the nobles of Egypt came into the house of Joseph, and the stick came into the hand of Reuel the Midianite. Again, it doesn't say the prince of Midian, it just says Reuel the Midianite. And when he went out of Egypt, he took it in his hand and planted it in the garden. Remember, we saw that. We read it like last week or the week before. And all the mighty men of the Kenites tried to pluck it out when they endeavored to get Zipporah, his daughter, but they were unsuccessful. So the stick remained planted in the garden of Reuel until he came who had the right to it and took it. Isn't that interesting? And when Reuel saw the stick in the hand of Moses, he wondered at it, and he gave him his daughter Zipporah for a woman. For a woman. Well, this is what verse 21 is going to say. Then Moses was content to live with the man, and he gave Zipporah, his daughter, to Moses. Look at how much happened. 10 years between the time he came and sat by that well and ate bread with Reuel, Jethro, in verse 20, to what's now happening in verse 21. We had a whole chapter about what had happened. Amazing. Okay, this says skip to verse 7, so we're going to do that. In those days, Moses, son of Amram, in Midian, took Zipporah, the daughter of Reuel the Midianite, for his woman. And Zipporah walked in the ways of the daughters of Jacob's daughters. Look at that. Zipporah walked in the ways of Jacob's daughters. She was nothing short of righteousness. She was nothing short of the righteousness, look at they call it righteousness, of Sarah, Rebekah, Rachel, and Leah. And Zipporah conceived and bare a son and called his name Gershom. Moses was content to live with the man, and he gave Zipporah his daughter to Moses. She bore him a son. He called his name Gershom, for he said, I have been a stranger, a ger, in a no-cree land. And Zipporah conceived and bare a son, and he called his name Gershom, for he said, I have been a stranger in a foreign land, a ger, in a no-cree land. But he circumcised not his foreskin at the command of Reuel, his father-in-law. Priest tells him not to circumcise his son. Priest of what? I would have to ask. I don't think he's a priest. And she conceived again and bare a son, but circumcised his foreskin and called his name Eliezer. Just keep saying she conceived and bare a son, but circumcised not and called his name Eliezer. The other thing we were reading in Torah said he bore a son and called his name Gershom. For Moses said, because the Elohim of my father was my help and delivered me from the sword of Pharaoh. And Pharaoh, king of Egypt, greatly increased the labor of Israel's seed in those days, and continued to make his yoke heavier upon Israel's seed. And he ordered a proclamation to be made in Egypt, saying, "Give no more straw to the people to make bricks with." They made it sound in Torah like he decided to not do straw after Moses had come to them. This appears that it's happening even before he comes to them. Let them go and gather themselves straw as they can find it. Also the tale of bricks, which they shall make, let them give each day, and diminish nothing from them, for they are idle in their work. And Israel's seed heard this, and they mourned and sighed and cried unto Yahovah on account of the bitterness of their souls. And Yahovah heard the voice of Israel's seed, and saw the oppression with which the Egyptians oppressed them. And Yahovah was jealous of his people and his inheritance. His inheritance. His inheritance would be those who are going to inherit what he has. Of course, he never dies, does he? And heard their voice, and he resolved to take them out of the affliction of Egypt. Take them out of Egypt's affliction, to give them the land of Canaan for a possession. Wow. Well, we have covered many chapters, probably close to 15 chapters in Yasher to get from Genesis 50 to Exodus 2. Amazing. We left off at Exodus 20, so I want to pick it up there. So he said to his daughters, "Where is he? Why is it that you have left the man? Call him that he may eat the bread." Well, from here until the next verse, he's been in prison for 10 years. Then Moses was content to live with the man, and he gave Zipporah, his daughter, to Moses. Reuel gave Zipporah, Moses took her. And she bore him a son. He called his name Gershon. And he said, "I have been a stranger, a ger in a no-cree land." Now it happened in the process of time that the king of Egypt died. The king of Egypt had already died by this time in Yasher. Then Israel's seed groaned because of the bondage, and they cried out. And their cry came to Elohim because of the bondage. Cry came to the Elohim. There it is. This is the Elohim. It's incorrect, so I want to make it correct and call attention to it. And their cries came up to the Elohim. Ha Elohim is the word that they're using here because of the bondage. So Elohim heard their groans and remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. And Elohim looked upon Israel's seed, and Elohim acknowledged them. Finally, the time is right. Father, look upon us and acknowledge us right now. It's time to bring us out of Egypt, out of all the places where you have scattered us. Please, Father, acknowledge us. You're Ezra men. He'll bring lots of other people to those Ezra men, but he's going to raise up the Ezra men first. Well, we'll go to 3. Now Moses was tending the flock of Jethro. Jethro, not Reuel, Jethro, his father-in-law. They call him the priest. Here it is, Kohan. Here it is, Kohan. Kohan, Midian. A priest of Midian, Midian's priest. Makes it sound like there's only one if you say it that way. Horeb. And he led the flock to the back of the desert and came to Horeb, the mountain of the Elohim. It's the mountain of the Elohim. Horeb. I thought it was called Sinai. Horeb. It says desert or mountain of dried up ground. A general name for the whole mountain range, which Sinai was one of the summits. Kind of gives you an idea when we talk about the rock at Horeb. It's the big rock. It's not Horeb. The rock isn't Horeb. The Horeb rock is at Horeb. But it gets called the rock at Horeb, isn't it? So that's what we're talking about. Horeb is kind of a general region. Sinai is a specific mountain, the mountain of Yehovah. They make it sound like came to Horeb, the mountain of Yehovah. Came to Horeb, maybe then the mountain of Yehovah. Maybe that's how we would understand that. And Yehovah's angel appeared to him in a flame of fire from the midst of the bush. So he looked, and behold, the bush was burning with fire, but the bush was not consumed. Messenger, the messenger of Yehovah. This is what we're talking about. Yehovah's melech, his messenger, is a sent one who speaks for him. If the messenger speaks, it's as if Yehovah speaks. In Yasher, however, it seems as though it is Yehovah himself who is speaking out of the fire. We'll see it when we go there. Not the melech. Then Moses said, I will now turn aside and see this great sight. By the bush does not burn. So Yehovah saw that he turned aside to look. Elohim called to him from the midst of the bush and said, Moses, Moses. And he said, here am I. Hear that? Moses was called by name, and Moses responded saying, here am I. Hineni. That's what I want to respond when Yehovah calls. Please, Father, call me. Also, I heard the voice of my master saying, whom shall I send? There's the sent one, the Shalach. And who will go for us? Then I said, here I am, send me. Oh, I want to be one of those sent ones. I want to be able to speak for Yehovah. Then he said, do not draw near this place. Take your sandals off your feet, for the place where you stand is holy ground. Moreover, he said, I am your father's Elohim, Abraham's Elohim, Isaac's Elohim, and Jacob's Elohim. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look upon the Elohim. Whole different understanding when you look at it in the Hebrew. He was afraid to look upon the Elohim. Are we afraid to look toward the Elohim? How come? Is it perhaps because we have not made him our only Elohim? I wonder. And Yehovah said, I have surely seen the oppression of my people who are in Egypt, and have heard their cry because of their taskmasters, for I know their sorrows. You know what? He could say exactly the same thing about us right now. I have heard the oppression of my people who are in Egypt. We are in Egypt. There's only two kingdoms, Egypt and Yehovah's kingdom. We're in Egypt. Shoot, I'm in Yehovah's kingdom as an Ezra man, but I'm still in Egypt. I hate it. My people who are in Egypt and have heard their cry because of their taskmasters, for I know their sorrows. So I have come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, to bring them up from that land to a good and large land, to a land flowing with milk and honey, to the place of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites. You know, I had to look at this. Canaanites. Canaan had Zidon, Heth, look up there on the right, Amari, Girgashi, Hivi, Arki, Seni, Aradai, Zimodai, and Kamathai. This is talking about the Hittites. Hittites are Hittites, it's a different way of saying it. Amorites is Amari. Perizzites, there is no Perizzite. Where does the Perizzite comes from? Maybe he's not a Canaanite. Hivites is the Hivi, but the Jebusite seems to be a repeat, because look what it says about Heth in Genesis 10. It says, Canaan begat Sidon, his firstborn, and Heth, the Jebusite. Well, Heth is also a Hittite. So, man, there seems like there's a lot of different names for this Heth character. Now, therefore, behold, the cry of Israel's seed has come to me, and I have also seen the oppression with which the Egyptians oppress them. Come now, therefore, and I will send you to Pharaoh. I will send you. What Jehovah says he's always going to do. That you may bring my people, who is his people? Israel's seed, out of Egypt. Well, he's going to bring them with all their families, isn't he? Come now, and I will send you. There it is. Shalak, that's the send. It uses variation. This is saying and. This is saying I. This is saying thee. I will send you. And then the root is shalak, this word right here. To Pharaoh, that you may bring my people, Israel's seed, and their families out of Egypt. Verse 12. So he said, I will certainly be with you, and this shall be a sign to you that I have sent you. This is going to be a sign to you that I have sent you. To me, this doesn't seem like much of a sign. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you shall serve the Elohim on this mountain. Well, how is that a sign? To me, that doesn't seem like, maybe the sign is the wrong word to be using for that. We are to serve the Elohim who is on the mountain, wherever we're at. Well, yeah, that's exactly right. We serve the Elohim on the mountain. I serve the Elohim on the mountain. We all serve Elohim on the mountain, wherever we're at. Maybe it's a sign not to you. Maybe it's a sign to those around us. Then Moses said to the Elohim. Again, we're talking about that definite article. Indeed, when I come to Israel's seed and say to them, the Elohim of your fathers Elohim has sent me to you, and they say to me, what is his name? What shall I say to them? Listen to what he says, you shall say to them. And Elohim said to Moses, I am who I am. The one who is the existing one has sent me to you. The existing one, but we still don't know his name. What's his name? People want to make that his name. It's not his name. Hayah, it's not his name. This is not his name. That is in the next verse. There it is. Thus you shall say to Israel's seed, I am has sent me to you. Moreover, Elohim said to Moses, thus you shall say to Israel's seed, Yehovah Elohim of your fathers. Your fathers Elohim. Here, I'm going to read it here. I translated it better here, I thought. Moreover, Elohim said to Moses, thus you shall say to Israel's seed, Yehovah your fathers Elohim. Which fathers are we talking about? Abraham's Elohim, Isaac's Elohim, Jacob's Elohim has sent me to you. He says, this is my name. Here he just said, Yahovah, your father's Elohim. He's using his name. Let's highlight his name. This is my name. That's a name, Yahovah. And this is a memorial and this is my memorial forever. I like how he does the forever. He uses this word door, but he uses it twice. Door. I'm going to open this up. You can see it together better. Door. He's repeating himself. Forever, from everlasting to everlasting. Look at the word is revolution of time. Revolution. It goes on and on and on. This is my name. This is the name that we're going to use. Moreover, Elohim said to Moses, thus you shall say to Israel's seed, Yahovah, your father's Elohim, Abraham's Elohim, Isaac's Elohim, Jacob's Elohim has sent me to you. This is my name, and this is my memorial forever. Go and gather the elders of Israel together and say to them, Yahovah, here we are, the same wording, your father's Elohim, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob's Elohim appeared to me, saying, I have surely visited you and seen what is done in Egypt. And I have said, I will bring you up out of affliction of Egypt to the land of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, the Jebusites, to a land flowing with milk and honey. Oh, I want some of that land. Then they will heed your voice. And you shall come, you and the elders of Israel, to the king of Egypt. Look at that. Then they shall hear your voice. So he's talking about they, being the elders of Israel, shall hear your voice. You and the elders of Israel to the king shall come to the king of Egypt. Did you know that the elders of Israel came to the king of Egypt? Wasn't just Moses and Aaron? I didn't realize that. And you shall say to him, Yahovah, Elohim of the Hebrews, has met with us. And now, please, let us go 3 days' journey into the wilderness that we may slaughter to Yahovah, our Elohim. Do you see why this would stir Pharaoh up? Pharaoh thinks that that little short guy, the 2-foot man, thinks that he is the Elohim. And if Yahovah is their Elohim, that means he's not their Elohim, doesn't it? You see why he would get stirred up? But I am sure that the king of Egypt will not let you go. No, not even by a mighty hand. So I will stretch out my hand and strike Egypt with all my wonders, which I will do. Look at one of the times he uses that word will. I will do. It shall be. Which I will do in its midst. And afterwards, that he will let you go. Remember, what Yahovah says, Yahovah does. I am Elohim. This is my name forever. Yahovah Elohim. This is my name forever. What he says he's going to do, I will give the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians. And it shall be when you go, you shall not go empty-handed. But every woman shall ask of her neighbor, namely, of her neighbor who dwells near her house, articles of silver, articles of gold, clothing, and you shall put them on your sons and daughters. So you shall plunder the Egyptians. Here he's talking about the women doing something. That's we saw it telling the men, but every woman shall ask of her neighbors. You shall plunder the Egyptians. It'd be women who are plundering the Egyptians. Isn't that, maybe that's ironic what he's doing. Instead of men plundering the Egyptians, it's going to be women. I mean, it's like so in your face. I think that's what's going on. Well, we've got lots more to cover. We're going to 4 next week. Let's see what's going to happen on 4. Burning bush. Yeah, we're going to talk about the burning bush. Oh, and we didn't get to the rod. You know that this is the second. Well, we talked about the rod some, but we're going to see the rod again. Last week, I thought we were going to get to the rod, and we didn't even cover it last week, so sorry about that. This week, we did get a chance to talk about the rod. You know, that was so cool that it's something that the Melchizedek used. The only time that Moses got in trouble was when he had the rod in his hand. Remember, at Horeb, he hit the rod, and the water gushed out when the people complained. The second time he got in trouble because he hit the rod twice, and he wasn't supposed to hit the rod. He was supposed to speak to the rock. I think that the reason Yehovah told him to speak to the rock was because in these last days, there's not going to be enough rods to go around for all the people that he's going to raise up in all the places where he has scattered us, because there's going to be a lot of Moses-type characters in the world. We're going to come to them, to the pillar of fire and smoke. Well, people are going to come to them, the pillar of fire and smoke. But they're going to have a rod, but they're just going to simply speak with their lips. Here, let's go to Isaiah. Yeah. But with righteousness he shall judge the poor, and decide with equity the meat of the earth. He shall strike the earth with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips he shall slay the wicked. I think that's what was going on. I think that's why Moses got in trouble. This rod was very, very important, but it's not a necessity. Yehovah and the power that he gives us is the necessity. Well, we got much, much more to talk about, and we'll do that next week. Hey, thanks for joining me. We'll catch y'all later. Love you tons. Bye-bye now.